The Agent Orange problem isn't in the past. It's today. I've told you just a few of my acquaintances that are going to die because of a chemical.
It was 1984 when Lyman and Cindy Campbell became the owners of Eckers Flowers and Greenhouses in Waverly, Iowa, after the business was passed down from Cindy's grandfather.
On the weekends, I'd stop into the flower shop, Eckers, and her dad and her grandfather ran the business. I was told by Grandfather Ecker, "I'll pay you $2.35 an hour if you quit your job, and you can still date my granddaughter."
Today, Lyman can be found doing odd jobs around the greenhouse, avoiding the cash register at all costs, per Cindy's lighthearted comments about goofing up the computer.
He's very good at plants and taking care of them, and very good artistically. He puts together beautiful gardens of plants and succulents, and he's very gifted with that.
The two can be found spending a lot of time together at Eckers, growing with each other in a place made for growing. But there's more than plants and a love story under this roof.
In October of 1968, I flew to Okinawa to serve my country in the Vietnam War.
During the 1950s, the United States committed to assist the government of South Vietnam stay free of communism. And ultimately, by the mid-1960s, the United States commits ground troops to Vietnam to accomplish that task.
All I had to do was drive, but to pick up bodies. And that's when I began thinking, this is just ridiculous. Just the disregard for the balance of life that was fighting that war didn't mean anything to the government or the higher ranking officials.
The United States made a commitment in 1962 to embark on what was called Operation Ranch Hand. And its goal was to use a variety of chemical agents, herbicides, to reduce cover for the enemy in Vietnam and to destroy crops in areas that were under the enemy's control.
In 1990, Lyman was diagnosed with peripheral neuropathy.
Neuropathy just means that there's a problem with the nerves, and peripheral neuropathy means it doesn't have to do with the central nervous system like the brain. So nerves in your hands, your feet, your arms, your legs, those outside of the central nervous system. And the peripheral neuropathy just means those nerves don't work right.
His disease, while very common in the United States, has an uncommon factor. It was due to exposure to Agent Orange during the Vietnam War.
We were told, that it's not going to hurt you. And I knew enough about it because my dad would not allow chemicals on the farm. Even growing up, everything was organic. He pulled weeds. And so when I actually left Vietnam and going into Okinawa back to that, I loaded barrels of Agent Orange, not knowing that that's what it was, because it didn't state it on the barrel, it just had the striping and many of them.
There were black and orange barrels used everywhere for traffic markers and piling sandbags on them. Everywhere there were black and orange barrels. The ground that we trained in around the perimeters was barren. And I didn't realize it at the time, but the ground was orange, where there were no vegetation. No one felt the need to be afraid of the defoliant at the time. You just did what you were told. No one thought anything about the chemicals.
I know for sure I was sprayed numerous times. So you always had your windows wide open, and these helicopters would just fly by and they'd have that mist going, and they really didn't care as far as they'd just turn and spray right up to you. And then Not knowing it as I do now, the mud and the river were just overflowing with it because the grounds were saturated and it rained plenty over there. And so you had it all over you.
The United States didn't understand the long-term consequences for health of individuals with Agent Orange. Agent Orange is composed of 2 commonly used herbicides. The mixture of them produces a dioxin that is among the most toxic substances known. And the effect of that was not really understood at the time. After the health consequences of it do come to be understood by the early 1970s, the United States then decided to discontinue the use of Agent Orange, but the damage both to the environment of Southeast Asia and to the health of American troops and of Vietnamese had already been done.
As a young adult during the war, Lyman's exposure to Agent Orange was especially dangerous.
When I went to Vietnam, I was 19. The chemicals that you're exposed to absorb into your bones and your tissue, and that causes it to stay there for many, many years.
Now in his early 70s, Lyman lives through each day despite the stinging pain in his body, a side effect of Agent Orange exposure that will soon cripple his legs and his ability to move under his own power.
From there, it's just spread. It's gone into my hands. Even my voice will start to change as far as the vocal area, and numbness throughout my feet, and just burning sensation all the time. Because I have the small fiber, which is called nerve bundles, and that's the one where all the little nerve ends end and die, and then they sting as they break. And so you go through that until you lose muscle tissue and become weak. And there's exercises. I do all that, try and eat the right diet, but I'm not beating it. It's starting to each year get a little bit worse.
Upon his initial return to the U.S., Lyman tried to readjust to civilian life, which proved difficult with his worsening condition.
It's nothing you can put a Band-Aid on or stitch up. And because his chemical balance is so off in his body, there's many medications that would normally treat something like that he reacts to. He has very adverse reactions. But as I saw what it was doing to him, I became more and more alarmed and concerned, and I watched him as he basically was wasting away. Lyman was very, very muscular and could do a great deal of physical things, and I was watching that disappear.
The DNA end of it is the silent part of it right now that is not really well understood. They're still denying that it could affect children, and there's just too many of them that are. It's not coincidence that all these veterans are having children that are deformed and defective with cancers and stuff. And they've done tests against civilian and veterans and found that there is substantial difference in that.
So my father died at the age of 68, heart disease, hypertension. That's a side effect of Agent Orange. I was born with spina bifida, which has been proven that is a side effect of Agent Orange. The government, though, is not real forthcoming. They tell me what a couple of the ships that he was on, but he served from 1962 to 1966.
Lyman's personal mission to educate others of Agent Orange and its effects, which have only spread like a virus across generations, pushes us into the future. And while his fate is in the hands of his condition, Lyman still tries to keep busy, keeping his mind off of the pain and shifting it to educating himself and others on policy, laws, and the science behind Agent Orange.
For almost 20 years, there was hardly any willingness on the part of the Defense Department and the VA to recognize that there was a special class of people with Agent Orange problems that ought to have help that other veterans would normally get.
They caused this, so they have to find an answer, or at least start acting a little bit more responsible with the war we've got going now, and it's staying irresponsibility as far as with these burn pits. Even these vets that are coming out of Afghanistan or Iraq, that they've been exposed to harmful chemicals through the burning pits, and even the jet fuel and the foaming devices that they use to put these fires out. And that the government starts to take more responsibility and think of their soldiers more so than the dollar bill.
So what they do is all the trash, medical, from the chow hall, they would put them in these pits and then just burn it and incinerate it. But what they found out was when you burn medical stuff, when you burn metal, that stuff goes up in the air and then people breathe it in. And so it could have a medical effect on you. The VA knows about it, but they have yet to still process all of the Agent Orange. So they kind of put the burn pits for Southeast Asia kind of like on the sideline, knowing that eventually they gotta deal with that problem.
His advocacy hasn't occurred without challenges. Refusing to become silenced, Lyman is now taking on the greater environmental impact of dioxin and other deadly toxins while continuing to push for reparations for himself, current and future generations.
I'm trying to make people more aware of the chemicals we're using. We're getting dangerously close to using dioxins because scientists are able to use a different term or name for that chemical.
If you really want to make a change, the first thing you can do is read the labels on your containers before, while, and after you're using them. Don't go above and beyond the recommended dosage. Dispose of things properly. Think. In other words, don't spray on a chemical right before rain because it's all going to wash off.
Though Lyman struggles to do daily tasks, he refuses to give up. He pushes on each day to be a voice for the voiceless, especially the individuals who have long been silenced, continuing to fight the battle beyond the battlefield.
You know, you could sit here and carry on about the destructiveness that I'm even feeling right now, you know, from toes to my left eye. But this would be my biggest hope, is to continue to push this as far as it'll go.